How can I navigate my fear of failure? Hi everyone, welcome back to my I Am Unafraid podcast, where I speak about life, love, and healing. This is your host, Lillian Okado. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. So today I want to speak about failure and how to overcome failure or the fear of failure, because maybe you've not failed, but you're afraid to fail. So I think first I'll tackle the overcoming the fear of failure. Now the only the only way to overcome the fear of failure, guys, is to fail. That sounds like an oxymoron or like irony or whatever, but I honestly think you can't learn something without going through that thing. Now, it doesn't mean that your failure has to be, it doesn't mean that you have to fail in a big way. I think the reason why people fear failure is because they see other people failing in a big way. And so they're afraid that they'll also have to fail in a big way for them to. No. Failure can be small things. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be something that completely changes your life or destroys your life. And I know I have talked about my own personal journey with failure and how my own failure has been pretty diabolical in the past. And sometimes it can get maybe scary for some of you because you're like, okay, I know Lillian, you're a strong woman, but we don't want to go through what you went through, and you don't have to. But here's the thing. Sometimes I call it the curse of the entrepreneur. And I'm just to put this in context. The day you decide to become an entrepreneur, for example, is the day you have decided that you're going to fail. And this is because entrepreneurship is a hard journey. It's an exciting journey, but it comes with a lot of unexpected things. And even when you think you know that you know, things happen and you realize that you don't know. So I think the first thing to deal with your fear of failure is to expect that it can happen. So it's not like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. No, it's more of you just being mature about the fact that the world is very cyclical and there are seasons that will happen, regardless of whether you want to try and control those seasons. There's summer, winter, spring, autumn, and they come in succession regardless. So summer is hot, winter is cold. Some people love summer, some people hate summer because of the heat. Others love winter, others hate winter because of the cold. Spring is for planting season. So these seasons are there, and they are the fullness of life. So don't fear the seasons of failure that may be ahead of you, because they are part of helping you to grow to become the person that you're supposed to be. So that's the first thing I would say about the fear of failure. Like, how do you deal with the fear of failure? But then there's also, which I think I'm a professional at, how do you deal with failure? Not the fear of, but with failure. Like, you actually go through failure. When I say I'm a professional at failing, I know I'm laughing about it and it's really funny now, but really I think I hold quite an award for failing. And I think for me, why I'm talking about it is because I've also, I think, mastered the art of overcoming failure. I honestly think that I have failed so much and so badly that I know, and repeatedly, and I've come out of those episodes of failure that I now honestly think I know how to get over. Like, there's nothing ahead of me that can maybe make me afraid of potential failure. Yeah. So I'm talking from experience, guys. And so just take it as that from my personal experience. But I think it can relate to you. So the first thing I would suggest is deal with shame. Now, failure comes with shame. Failure, in my situation where first of all, let me give an example of where I feel like initially I failed. So let's say when I got my baby initially, how I felt like a failure, because in my mind I always wanted to have because I grew up in a polygamous home. So I didn't grow up in a nuclear kind of family, which in my mind then was the perfect setup. I always did not want to grow up in a polygamous or in a broken kind of setup or structure. And so I really worked hard to maintain myself and to be like, no, I have to be in this relationship that is leading to marriage and we will live happily ever after. I knew by the time I was going to turn 24, I was going to be living on in a nice white house somewhere on nice lawn with a white picket fence. I knew I knew I'd be married by 24. I knew I'm 44, so 20 years later. I knew I'd be married by 24. I knew I would have 3 children. That was my vision. And that was my end. And I guess I was young. I mean, by the time I was thinking about this, I was 18. So that was my success meter for my relationships, or my relationship. And when it didn't happen, when I turned 34 and I realized I was going to be parenting a baby on my own for the rest of my life, at least most of it, or some of it, I was extremely disappointed, but I was also ashamed. I felt like, in fact, let me give you a joke. I'm very private with my relationships. Sometimes it may not seem like it, but I'm very private with my relationship side of things. So I remember even throughout, anytime I was dating somebody or talking to a boy or a guy or, things like that, or in something happening, my family never knew. I think my parents, at a point I was even thinking that they must have been shocked when they found out I was pregnant. Because it wasn't something that, for me, sex out of marriage was always that taboo subject. And so when it happened and now the world knew because I had a baby and I couldn't hide the fact, I was like, now everybody knows I've been fornicating. Anywho, so I was ashamed. I was initially ashamed. But at a point I had to get over the shame. And one way that I did that helped me get over the shame was I forgave myself. I said sorry to my younger self, because my younger self wanted life to happen a certain way or for my relationship to end a certain way, and it didn't happen. So I said sorry to my younger self, but I also forgave myself for not meeting my expectation. But then I also decided to be kind to myself, because I also realized that whatever happened, part of it was out of my control. So yes, there were things that were in my control, but part of it was out of my control. Because by the time you end up as a single parent, I think majority of the people who are single parents, they will tell you that they didn't plan for it. It was not in their plan. So I had to accept and forgive myself and tell myself, but genuinely that was not in my plan. So that's number one. In that failure, that's how I dealt with it. And I think even when it comes to business, my business failure that I had years later, I went through shame again, because I was this up and coming entrepreneur, doing well, looking like driving a German car, living in the suburbs, looking like I'm doing well, traveling the world. And then when it came down toppling, I was ashamed that the facade I had built, because it was really a facade then, came tumbling down, and I had to face my demons, and I had to face people who once looked up to me as this successful entrepreneur. And I had to get over it. It took me time. And more importantly, I was ashamed at the decisions I made that helped facilitate my downfall. Because, guys, we're not an island. Things don't happen in isolation. Things don't happen to you in isolation without you being in the thing. So I had to come up and accept that I had a role to play in my own failure. And when I did that, it really helped me to deal with that failure that I was going through. So deal with the shame, whatever kind of shame it is, whether it is in business, whether it is in your life or your love life, deal with it. Forgive yourself. Third, stop ruminating over what could be or could have been. I have been really good at that. I used to be so good at looking behind. And I don't know how sometimes when you go through something that really affects you, you really dwell on it. You can be there acting like you're all strong when you're around people, but sometimes I would come to my house, to my bedroom, and I'm alone with my thoughts, and I would be going back to that thought and thinking, I should have done this, I could have done this, if I did that, if I did. And guys, that made things worse. That made my failure experience worse. So for anyone who has not yet gone through that, please keep this in mind, that if you go through failure of any kind, do not dwell on what happened or what could have been. It doesn't help. Third, stop thinking about the future. Now, I say this in the sense that, of course, we need to plan our future. We need to know where we want to go. We need to have a 10-year, 5-year plan for every area of our life, whether it's spiritual, emotional, financial, relational. You need to have goals and aspirations that guide you towards your North Star or where you need to be ultimately. However, big disclaimer and big however, please don't focus on the future. Don't focus on, how do I say it? It's okay to be forward looking, but when you focus on the future and where you want to go. So let's say now, for example, you're starting out in your career, in your life, or you've had a failure experience and that has taken you a couple of steps back and you're almost at ground zero. Now, in your brain, because you already saw yourself ahead and you knew that in 5 years' time, I will be here, but now you're here and you're looking at the distance. Like sometimes, there are times when I used to look back and I think, oh my God, I was so close to financial freedom and independence and retirement. And then all of a sudden in a year, I was back to as if I had never started anything in my life. And when I was looking at how hard I had worked to get to where I was so close to financial freedom, how much effort I had put, how much, how I had burnt the midnight oil, it paralyzed me. It made the future so scary and I was so focused on, oh my God, I need to get there, I need to get there. However, I was forgetting the present. So again, the next point is, don't forget where you're at now, right? This is where you're at. Forget the past, forget the future, look at the present. Where are you right now? What can you do today? Today. What can you do today at the end of the day? At the end of the day, analyze what you did throughout the day. Forget yesterday, forget the future, because whatever you do today will get you to tomorrow, whether you like it or not. If you do nothing today, you'll still get to tomorrow. If you do something, you'll get to tomorrow. So focus on the things that you can do right now. Focus on what you can control. The future is not really in your control. You can plan and plan and plan, but God has his plans, right? So think of now as well. Something else to deal with failure is seek out people who are willing to talk about their own failure experiences and how they overcame them. So I remember when I was going through my own journey of dealing with failure, in the very beginning, when I was still in my space of pride, and I confess I was a bit prideful there, I didn't want to really, I thought I knew everything. I thought I had the answers, because I knew that because I had brought myself to success, I knew that I could get myself out of success, right? But really, when you think about it, success happened, but success didn't happen alone. It happened with people. And similarly, getting out of a failure situation may not happen alone. You may need people to guide you back to level ground and then to guide you to the next steps. So seek counsel for you to deal with failure. And if you imagine that in the future there could be a failure event that may happen beyond your control or within your control, whichever, have people around. Begin to surround yourself with people right now, wise people, people who have your best interests at heart. Because I remember at a point when things were really falling apart, and I was seeking counsel from people who, first of all, who had never been through what I'd been through. People who, even if they'd never been through what I'd been through, had never counseled other people who had been through what I'd been through. And so they were giving me wrong information, and I was implementing wrong information and digging bigger holes. That was horrible. It was really, really horrible. So by the time I realized that I'm digging a bigger hole because of these people, it was insane. It was crazy. So seek wise counsel. Wise counsel can look like a spiritual mentor, or it can look like I said, people who've been there, done that. Like for me right now, I have a heart for helping people who are going through situations in their life where they're just feeling stuck, because I've been there and I've kind of gotten out of that space. I'm still working on getting better and better, but I know that I'm at a point in my life whereby failure doesn't give me fear anymore or sleepless nights. What gives me sleepless nights is my freedom. So sometimes I feel like if I don't have the freedom to be me, to be authentic, to do what I want, that's what gives me fear, but not failure. So for those who are listening to this, if you're in a point in your life where you're feeling like you need to talk to somebody, just drop me a DM, drop me a comment, and I'll see if I'll be able to help you. So that's one, seek counsel. And then the final one, be ready to start from ground zero. Yes, like you are at the top of your career, you had the most perfect marriage, you spent millions on your wedding, you are the epitome of success, or the SI unit of success, and then one day you wake up and it's all gone, disappeared. What I can say is, try and mourn as fast as you can. Try and mourn as fast as you can. And then be ready to start over. Starting over is hard. So let me give you an example. Why I say be ready to start over is because I remember when I was going through, when things were beginning to fall apart, I didn't want to acknowledge that things were falling apart. I didn't want to. So I didn't want to scale down my lifestyle, for example. I didn't want to let go of relationships, networks. I didn't want people to know that I was going through a hard time. So some of the hard things I went through, when I think about it in hindsight, some of them were my fault. Like, let me give you an example. I remember when I was about to be evicted from my home, my apartment, for the second time. And I was really broke. I didn't have a penny to my name. I didn't know when the next paycheck was coming in. And I didn't want anybody to know. So I was putting appearances. And it was so bad that I would be with my friends or I would be around people and they'd just be thinking that I'm living la vida loca. Like, I just looked like I was having a ball. Like, I was putting on, like, this word, the facade. I was not being authentic. I was afraid. And I didn't want people to see me. So I had a mask on. And the longer I put on that mask, the worse things got. So in hindsight, sometimes I think that if I had, acknowledged my failure. So that's another one. You have to acknowledge that you have failed. Sometimes as human beings, we don't want to be called failures. We don't want to be examples of failures, you know. We always want to show the rosy side of life. We always want to act like we know everything. We're doing good. Yeah, we have it all figured out. And I didn't want to because I was being prideful, right? I didn't want to start over because starting over is hard. Starting over means letting go, like you're in an apartment, fancy apartment, and you're like, okay, I'm going to move with the clothes on my back, and I'm going to move into a tiny space, and I'm going to start from zero with one cup, one spoon, one. So let me give you someone who I really look up to, and that's my mom, the one who raised me. She's such a perfect example of somebody who's resilient and somebody who knew how to start over. I remember when and I'm being vulnerable here at the risk of offending some people, when we left my dad, and she left and she started over from zero. And it was so funny. We were coming from this very fancy home that had everything. We had a washing machine. Back then, we had everything. You know, cookers and all those things. I mean, this may sound normal, but considering we had everything, and then one day we had to wake up and move with the clothes on our backs and move with cups and spoons and start over. For her to start over at her age back then, knowing that everybody around her knew that she was that successful woman living in a successful home, married to a successful man, and then she then had to start over. And I think when my own failure experience happened, I drew strength from that, knowing that if my mother started from ground zero, then who am I, you know? And I think if you're in that situation, I'm going to encourage you. Don't hold on to things that are of no value. Get courage and look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, where will I be in 5 years if I hold on to this failure? Where will I be if I let go? Yeah. So that's it for now, guys. So just to recap, how to deal with fear of failure and failure itself. Deal with the shame, number 1. Forgive yourself, number 2. Stop ruminating on what could be or could have been. Stop thinking too much about the future, because that will paralyze you and will not enable you to move forward. Number 5, seek out people, seek wise counsel, seek advice from people who know or have been through what you've been through, or who have counseled people who have been through what you've been through, and then be willing to start over. But something else, if all that fails, seek therapy. For years, I fought therapy because I'm not a very vulnerable person talking about my problems to strangers. But I think it helps and I recommend it. So seek therapy and professional help. Yeah. So thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and share, comment, and see you soon. Bye.